everyone. I'm pretty sure that you're a little tired from all the talks and presentations, so I'm going to be as brief and as concise as possible. My name is Tunji Durodola. I am the founder and executive chairman of a small startup called UrbanID Global. Who am I? I've had an extensive background in information technology since the 1980s. I've had the honor and the privilege of being the first to develop the world's first electronic version of the London Underground tube map back in 1987 for a palm top called the Scion Organizer. I've been a consultant to oil and gas industries for the better part of about 40 years, and heavily into the Linux operating system. So I have not used Windows, for example, since probably 2001. I'm heavily into open source and believe very passionately in the hands-on approach to so many things. I've served as identity management consultant, mainly in Nigeria, but also for two other African countries. And now we have a presence here in the UAE, trying to expand our opportunities to different environments. UrbanID Global has a presence in but the UAE, the United Kingdom, Estonia, Nigeria, and a couple of other African countries. We have subsidiaries in Nigeria, as you can see there, Common Identity and True ID. And we also have another subsidiary that is focused on cybersecurity. So that's a little background of what we do. Now, one of the main things that we are interested in is data privacy. A lot of governments have invested so much time and effort in manpower and all whatnot to build identity ecosystems. But unfortunately, the bad actors will always be out there to try and see how they can exploit weaknesses and vulnerabilities in those systems. And that is where we actually come in. So what we try to do is to make sure that we provide different ideas and concepts to protect the identity of those who need to be verified in one system or the other, KYC as we well know it. But that itself presents a lot of challenges. And we have built a lot of ecosystems and technologies to ensure that when an individual presents themselves for verification, it is done in such a manner that conforms to and complies with international standards and best practices. So, what we have done, for example, in Nigeria is we took the old systems that had been in place. I was responsible for the design and the development of the first polycarbonate-based identity smart card that was issued between 2012 and 2014. But it was fraught with all manner of challenges, not just the fact that the government wasn't actually paying the kind of monies that they needed to pay to maintain such systems. So the government then said, oh, okay, what they were ready to do was to leapfrog forward to see how they could digitalize the identity management in Africa's largest environment. So what we did was that we then took the whole of the database. We build our own servers ourselves. We don't buy off-the-shelf this thing. We take all the various components. We very carefully handpick the components to make sure that they meet very stringent and exacting standards. Because one of the things that we don't want is the concept of server is down. As we go along, I'll quickly run through all of this to let you know what we have done. So the basic framework of what we put together, we call it MWS, or Mobile Web Services, whereby we have broken it down into different components. We have mobile identity development, we have artificial intelligence. We also play in the space of public key infrastructure, which is very important if you are actually dealing with governments, and much more than that. Now, what we then do is that once we have put the infrastructure within the government data center, because we try to avoid the scenario whereby we do on cloud this government databases. So we are a strong proponent of on-premise. So what we then do is to try and make sure that once we have complied with all their checks and balances to make sure that there are no leakages anywhere, and we have hardened all the servers we've put in place, we then build digital profiles of the basic information that has been provided. We were very fortunate to have developed Africa's first mobile ID ecosystem. And today, there is a rollout of 23.75 million. Now, it is this low because the government has not actually done the kind of advertisement and aggressive marketing that we had expected. So this 23.5 million is mainly because of word of mouth, and also because of advertisements made by the telecoms industries themselves who have done this thing. Now, we've done it in such a way whereby the identity holder is the one who then determines what level of information is shared for verification. And then we also then redesigned the slip that is issued for those who do not have smartphones. Not everybody has smartphones. So that you have an ability to actually go to a secure center, print out this paper-based slip. But we then put in a number of features to make sure that we can conform to ICAO specifications. ICAO is the International Civil Aviation Organization, an arm of the United Nations, just to make sure that these documents can be trusted anywhere they're actually presented. Now, this is just an overview as to how these documents can then be verified. Now, the document itself contains an Aztec barcode rather than a QR code. And that was done for specific reasons, although the mobile ID itself has a QR code based therein. But it's done in such a way to make sure that it's only the government mobile ID that can be used to verify that document. And it also therefore means that you have to be duly authorized or approved to be able to verify someone else's credentials. Now, what we then do is that once the verification has been completed, that transaction ID is then written to a blockchain database, which is where blockchain comes in. Now, what we do not do is write personal information to any blockchain. Only the type of transaction that was made, the date, and we make sure we use something called network timestamping to make sure that all the servers within the ecosystem are accurate right down to the last millisecond. So that is then done for that one. Now, the second phase of what we have done is called user consent management. Why have we done this? We did this mainly because a lot of entities in the old ecosystem that we met on ground, what they were doing is that they were getting licenses, verification licenses, and then they will use the old API to fetch people's information. They will store it in local databases, unencrypted, unsecured, and all manner of things were going on. So the government, under the auspices of the World Bank, then asked us to then develop a user consent management system, which was based on tokenizing personal identity. So what we then had to do was to make sure that we came up with a system that would be fault tolerant, that will be easy to verify, and to make sure that somebody's identity is protected whilst conforming to the requirements for KYC. Now, what we then did was to make sure that we broke the system into two sectors. What I described earlier on is the peer-to-peer or the consumer-based part of it, but the other part is the enterprise one. And in Nigeria today, for example, you cannot get a SIM card without having to go through that system. You can't get a SIM card without having to provide your national identification number. Well, that was the way it was in the past. But nowadays, the way that it has now been designed is designed in such a way that you have to seek user consent in the form of a token, which I will quickly run through for you. So basically, what it is designed is that you go to a telco, and they will present to you the enterprise ID. You will then either use USSD or your mobile ID to generate a user consent token for them, and they will now use that to make that request for your personal information. That's what that is done. So that's the design of the virtual token that is designed, and we also make sure that we use an international standard of to make sure that that token can be validated right in the front end before it is sent to the back end for verification. So there's a checksum at the very end of that document. So that's the design of that one. Now moving forward, what we then did is that, so you have the national identification number, there's a consent request that is made, then the user consent token is then generated, it is then delivered to the entity who carries out the verification transaction, which is then written to the blockchain. So that is the overview of the concept. It's not transferable between individual to individual and also from enterprise to enterprise. And it is a once-use token. It can only be used once. So this was the problem statement that they had at the very top. So what was happening was that they had a number of license verification agents. Those license verification agents would then develop an API for sub-agents. The sub-agents could not meet the expectations of the government that for them to get a license themselves. So we were now hiding behind the license verification agent. But the government did not know who that sub-agent was. And then the sub-agent would also do the same thing as the other guy and come up with something similar as well. But what we have now done is that we've taken all this away and made sure that there is no one that can carry out any verification of any individual without the knowledge of both the government and the ID holder. Everyone must know who that value chain is. Now, in the blockchain, what we've done is that the transparency and accountability is where the transaction is actually written to make sure that if there is a problem later on, there is that non-repudiation that is available, because you can't deny that that transaction actually took place. Now, I've talked a bit about the kind of infrastructure that we put together. We build all our systems ourselves. We try to make sure that there's full redundancy. Right there is where you see the type of blockchain we use. We use multi-chain, credential management system. The database itself that we put in place is to make sure that transparent data encryption is, without question, top priority. And we also make very strong use of hardware security modules for encryption. Now, one of the last things I want to point out is that because the World Bank is actually involved in a lot of the projects that we actually do, we actually have to make sure that to try to conform to and comply with international standards and best practices. So that is our aim and our goal. So that is my last and final slide. Thank you very much for being a listening audience. If there are any questions later on, we have a stand right next door there. We're happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.